Hello. By far my most popular video so far, and none of them are very popular, but my most popular video is the portable toolbox that I built, and it tells me that at least somewhat there's a little bit of interest in toolboxes, and I thought it would be fun to show you two old vintage boxes. Now I say vintage because of two things: age and the classic design, or that there's a design here that fits a pattern of design popular I think across the world, but certainly in the United States and probably in the UK as well. Maybe some viewers could tell me, but I know in the US this design, you'll see a pattern of them like this design. My grandfather on my mother's side was a carpenter. He was born in 1907, and he was too young to fight in World War I and too old to fight in World War II. He became a carpenter at a young age, so he was carpentering already in the 1920s. By the time of the Second World War, call went out across this country for carpenters and tradesmen of all types to help in the war effort, and there was a real need for skilled carpenters in the shipbuilding yards, the shipyards. So he spent extended lengths of time away from home, which was Nashville, Tennessee. He left his wife and baby to go work in the shipyards in New Jersey. The best that I can tell, he worked about a year. He probably took this case with him in the war and took some of his most needed hand tools. Still very much a hand tool era. He also worked in shipyards in Mobile, Alabama, so I don't know how long he was gone from home then. So I picture my grandfather, Alvin H. Grammer, toting this box in a suitcase on a train, crossing from Nashville, Tennessee to some location like New Jersey, and carrying his most important and needed hand tools. And I don't know what kind of ships they built, if they were military ships or those so-called victory ships or what they were, but he died in 1978. He was almost 71 years old, and I was about 15, 16, almost 16 years old. And to this day, I wish I had one more day with him just to talk to him. But he built this box. When he came back after the war, he and his two brothers were carpenters. They were house builders in the housing boom that started up after the war. So in the late 40s, he and his two brothers were building small market ranch homes. You know, typically no basement, crawl space with a small ranch on a lot, small lot in the suburbs of Nashville, Tennessee. He built sometimes every house on the street. That was in the days when the carpenters really did almost every trade. I think they probably had an electrician that did their electrical wiring, but nearly everything else they did. They may have had a plumber, but I doubt it. They would get somebody to dig for them, and then they would do the concrete footings, lay the block themselves, build the crawl space, build the house. Usually there was brick veneer, so they would lay the brick. They do everything, and in many of the homes they built the kitchen cabinet and made some of the doors. Certainly hung all the doors, did all the trim work, but sometimes they made the kitchen cupboards and built in, which wasn't uncommon. A lot of their homes had so-called steel Youngstown kitchens with a steel case type cabinet manufactured in Youngstown, Ohio, and usually a porcelain on steel or porcelain on cast steel type countertop, combination countertop sink. They did a lot of homes that way all throughout the United States, but they did a lot of them that way. But if there were cabinets, most of the time they built in the kitchen cupboards. They were really skilled people. They were highly skilled people. And my grandfather built this case. These locks are pretty well gone. They don't do anything. This hasp is the only thing holding it together. And it's a very common design. There's no tools in it yet to this day. There's a few loose items in here that don't make any sense to me. One of them does. There's the handle, a socket style replacement handle to a socket type chisel, kind of like the Stanley Sweethearts. This is a handle that would fit those, and that's in here to this day. And then there's a few other oddball things like spanner wrenches from commercial door hardware. So, you know, I don't think, maybe really old doors had used these to put the rosette on or not, I don't know. But there's a few odds and ends in here, but nothing of any consequence. But you can see the top had a little till area for saws, and they would put their leather, and I can remember as a child seeing him do this, put saws up in this lid. He would have a rip saw and 2 crosscut saws. Then a little lift out till, and then another till, and then this classic curved, I'm going to see if you can see this, this classic curved front, kind of a flip door front, this classic curved cutout, and then strap hinges here. It was painted, and it was probably leaded paints. It's crackled now, but you'd pay big money to buy the products to get that kind of crackling that it's on there. And you flip this door down, you had access to the bottom. Probably kept a hand plane in there. I just can't remember as a child what he would have kept in there, but he probably had a hand plane, some miscellaneous carpentry tools, a hammer, and a few other things. I don't know what he would have kept, and this was set up like a little drawer. It has little runners on it. There's little slats on the side just nailed. It would slide in like a little drawer. It's like another till. So I don't know with these compartments if this would have been maybe stuff like a sliding T-bevel and some other little layout tools. This combination square wouldn't fit there. Maybe a small one would. I don't know what he would have had. Folding rules maybe. Possibly a tape measure if they had them back then. There's a small compartment here which would be really small stuff. I don't see anywhere for a framing square or so-called rafter square, carpenter's type big square, so I don't know if that was something they carried or not. I wish I knew more about it. I wish I could date this for you, but I'm going to say that it's late 30s when he built this. Although it has plywood, almost the entire thing is constructed out of plywood on this box. I have another box I'll show you in probably another video, but a larger box, and it has both some solid wood and some plywood in it, but this box is entirely plywood. In fact, it was made with whatever he had on hand, because this till, which fits perfectly, has one thickness of end here and a smaller one down here. So he just used up what he had to make this, scraps and so forth. It's all nailed together. There's nothing fancy. Some of the hardware has like a through bolt with a little square nut on it for these strap hinges, which kind of makes sense to me. But again, they don't all match. Some of them are panheads, some of them are slotted. He literally used whatever he had. He put some metal corner guards on it, and it's nailed. He typically has like a rabbet joint in some of the spots, but not everywhere. So it's painted inside now, except for the little drawers, and the sides are 3/4. The rest of it is something else, usually 3/8 or half. And like I say, in some spots, 1/4. On the bottom is a piece of solid pine, so he had that. On the other one, there's a piece of plywood in the bottom. I don't think it's solid wood. No, it is. It's solid wood. So there is solid wood in the bottoms of the drawers, I guess because he happened to have it. It's just an old classic design, and still really a usable design today for a hand wood woodworker, hand tool type woodworker. The access here makes sense. Small compartments make sense. A larger upper compartment probably made sense for the combination square, maybe a 2-foot level. Like I say, the only puzzling thing to me is there's no rafter square, so I don't know what they did for that, if they carried it separate or had some other trick for that to carry it. The sawtill makes pretty good sense to me, and like I say, it's still really a useful design. It measures, it's about 32 inches by about 9 inches by about a foot tall, a little over a foot tall. This is about 14 inches tall, so it's pretty compact. Now the other one that I'll do another video on, I'll give you a brief glimpse of it. It's larger, and I'll set it on my newly made Sawhorses here, which I've painted because I'm kind of like my grandpa. I tend to paint my Sawhorses if I can, because you wouldn't believe how much longer they'll last. Now this one, the latches work still. See how framed you are, yeah. But it's essentially the same design, only larger. It's about a foot deep, about 18 inches tall, and about 32 to 34 inches long. Again, capable of holding saws, but no visible means that that's what they did. There's one big till, there's the fold down front, and one big till. This one I really like. I really feel like this is a usable design. I know it would be quite heavy, but if you don't move it a whole lot, it wouldn't be too bad. It has rabbet joints, typically plywood construction throughout. Little rabbeted joints here, piano hinge here. Put a piece of strap metal like aluminum L-angle as a protector, which he could have done later, in later years. And I cannot date this for you, but I would say it's probably 60s, early 60s, late 50s that he would have built this. After he built houses after the war for 12 years or so. In the late 50s, 10 or 11 years of house building, about 13 years of house building, and then he was hired at a TV station in Nashville. It was the old WLAC TV station. Mr. Baker was his boss, the owner. He's a millionaire that owned the station, hired him, and he was a stage carpenter. He built most of the early sets for Hee Haw until it went syndicated and went Hollywood. So throughout the early 60s, he was building sets for Hee Haw from 1957 onward, and worked there until he retired in the mid-70s. And he probably built this and kept tools down at the station when he hired in there. And he had a large shop in the basement of the TV station. Back in those days, a stage carpenter worked right at the TV stations and did a lot of the stage carpentry. Now everything's either Hollywood, or they have union carpenters come in and do their staging for a lot of the work for the news shows and the local shows. So this is a video for another day, but they both have plywood. I'm dating this somewhere around 1955 to 1960. But the old green one, I'll set it back up here. I'm going to date this, I think, before or during World War II. And when you say plywood, you have to wonder about the date, because it's easy to think that plywood wouldn't have been used that early, or that it wasn't even around. And I worked with carpenters that fought in the war. They were a little younger than my grandfather. They were about 10 to 20 years younger than my grandfather, and they fought in the war. When they got out of the war, they became carpenters as well. And they told me they don't remember plywood hitting this area until about 1950. as a regular, everyday building material in house building. And they do remember it, but they don't remember it being commonly used. I can't go into the history of plywood. I don't even know all the history of plywood, but I'll tell you this much. Plywood is not new. Plywood was talked about in the 1700s. It was discussed and talked about as early as 1790s. We know it was being made in the 1800s, and an application for a patent to make the rotary cutting veneer cutter was patented around 1870, the application. So we know that it was probably a widely used product in the 1860s in the U.S. If they were fighting over patents for the machine to make the veneers to make plywood in 1870, then plywood was already in existence and being used before that. So another aspect to plywood is that we know that 4x8 plywood in the U.S. was a common building material as early as the late 20s. One documented date is 1928. It was a common building material sold in 4-foot by 8-foot sheets. So plywood's pretty old and easily could have been available for him to build this in the 30s or 40s. So lest we think that, oh, it has to be much later because it's got plywood is not really true. Now I will say the first-hand accounts of the use of plywood from my teachers and people I trained with and taught me, their first-hand stories tell me that they were not using the product till about 1950 and really using it big time by 1960. So that would indicate a later use of it, but it doesn't mean it didn't exist or that it wasn't used ever. It just wasn't as common here in Ohio where they were working, in Kentucky where they were working. So that's all I know about this. I'm going to continue to research it, but I thought it would be fun to look at it, and the design is still quite useful. Thanks for watching.